Chair Randall and Board Member Crystal. Chair McKay was not able to be here today. We have Delegate Watts with us, and Chair Wheeler has temporarily been appointed to Finance Committee so that we can have a physical quorum here at the NDTA office. First of all, summary minutes is approval of the summary minutes of June 17th. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve? Do we have a second?
Second, Chair Randall.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain?
I will abstain.
Abstention from Chair Wheeler. Okay, and the minutes are passed. Thank you. Moving on to approval of forward appropriations. Mr. Lonke.
Thank you, Mayor Rochelle. This item, well, first of all, I thank all the participants for their patience as we work through the typical unexpected technical difficulties. I know that the staff takes this very seriously, try to fix it as soon as they could. Onto this item, the brief background is regional revenue fund appropriations are typically done as part of the budget adoption cycle in the spring of each year. Prior to that, we asked jurisdictions to let us know what appropriations for their projects that they want to have adopted into that budget. This project in particular was being managed by the town of Dumfries when that appropriation request deadline came through. Subsequently, the authority took action in April to move the project from the town of Dumfries to Prince William County, mostly because Prince William County has extensive construction experience along Route 1 and could advance the project. To kind of shorten the whole package, that actually worked out really well. And now they can start using this money in fiscal 22. So this item is an out-of-cycle appropriation, forward appropriation of $44.8 million. Staff is very comfortable moving this forward because of the unique circumstances of project management transferring. And additionally, fiscally, there are no hurdles here in that the total project appropriation for fiscal 22 was approximately $33 million. These appropriation cycles have been running in the $500 million to $100 million levels. So there's certainly enough fiscal elbow room to put this project forward for fiscal 22. With the committee's endorsement, this will go to the authority for the authority's October meeting for final approval as a budget item. And we believe the county is going to be prepared with an SPA for that same meeting so that they can continue the progress we're making on this project. And with that, I'll be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lonke. Are there any questions?
Madam Chair, I just want to say, I think I just want to say back what Mr. Lonke just said to make sure I understood that. So of course I would be, voting for the item, and gosh knows, we've been doing so much work to work on Route 1, and it does need it. But are we saying that that this appropriation is coming out of money that has already been appropriated to Prince William County, and now will be coming out of that and going to the town of Dumfries? I read the item. I'm just missing that a little bit.
The authority action in April was to cancel the SPA with the town of Dumfries, which was not on this tranche of funding. That was an earlier funding tranche, and then reestablished it under Prince William. These funds have never been appropriated before.
Oh, okay. That's where I lost that. Okay, I understand.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Chair Wheeler, would you like to make the suggested motion?
Yes, I recommend the authority approval of the forward appropriation item 3 for the action then.
Do we have a second? Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lonke. Next, we have an investment portfolio report under information. And Mr. Lonke, if you like, would you like to take the next several in series, stopping as you feel appropriate for questions. Thank you.
Addressing the investment portfolio report, what we typically do in the meeting after the August recess is do the fiscal year end recap. So these numbers are very close to final. They've not yet actually been audited, but they're in process and we don't anticipate any changes. We're kind of doing a fiscal 21 recap on the next three items. The investment portfolio, I'm pleased to report that the portfolio, if you look at page 2, the box at the bottom, has exceeded its benchmarks rather substantially. We had talked over the preceding months about the fact that the portfolio is going to end up matching the market. We've actually been able to keep it from declining further. On the horizon, I think if you're attuned to the financial news, we're hoping, at least from a portfolio perspective, that interest rates will start to turn around and go back up. Obviously, that's not as pleasant for those issuing debt, but it's certainly a good thing for the portfolio. The portfolio in what I would call a non-pandemic year can be expected to produce about $26 million. And again, these are dollars that are sitting with the county, waiting, that are allocated to projects and just waiting for the expenditure cycle to happen. So the management of these funds is allowing us to actually fund more projects. With that, I'd be happy to respond to any questions on investments.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make sure I heard right. So these funds are with the county. Would you mean to say these funds are with the
Yeah,
authority?
I'm
yeah.
sorry. Almost 30 years in local government.
Right. Well, this is critical as to why we are able to gain that millions of dollars for additional projects.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Long.
Okay, the next item is our monthly revenue report. And again, we're using this as a basically an end of the fiscal 21 recap. I'm pleased to report that income was approximately $97 million over projection. We did make a COVID-19 reduction to our revenue projections last year. We, along with, I think, a lot of other entities, were a little bit too pessimistic on the sales tax impact. Part of that was because we really had just had about a year's worth of experience on internet sales tax collections. And I do believe that the internet sales tax collection action taken by the General Assembly was substantial in being able to have these numbers. With a $97 million overall positive balance to our projection, that means that $29 million was distributed as 30% funds to the 9 local jurisdictions within the authority. We will be starting the revenue estimate process again. We will relook at all of our existing estimates, and we'll be adding fiscal 26 and 27 to that process over the winter, preparing for presentations to the Finance Committee in the early spring, and then a recommendation to the authority. And with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions on revenues.
Yes, ma'am.
A comment and then a question. The comment on the internet sales may also add to it that what you just described for the authority funds is basically what's been happening for statewide Commonwealth funds writ large. In that, one of the reasons we were pessimistic is I don't think anybody really processed what the virtual work would mean, so that this area that has so many people at a professional level that they were able to continue to work at full salary, where we didn't have the unemployment factor that would have depleted the resources for retail purchases, in addition to the fact that the robustness of the internet sales is, again, thank goodness Virginia was right out of the block on getting that provision. The other question that I have, though, as far as the makeup of our tax structure, when it comes to the grantor's tax has the robustness of retail, home sales also caused a greater increase in this than what was projected, or how are we from it?
Absolutely. Grantor's tax is up about 15 million. So of the 97 million, of 15 million, 15 million is coming from grantors. We had the delayed implementation of the full grantor's rate that was done as part of the government budget adjustments. That did kick in a couple months ago. We are the robustness of residential real estate transactions in terms of value and number of transactions has just been somewhat unprecedented. We are, as we go through the revenue estimation process, we are going to be very mindful of the impact on commercial properties, especially office properties. Industrial and warehouse properties are likewise doing very, very well. But the office space will be something that we will be looking at as we make those long-term revenue projections. Because as we all know, we're all waiting for the pandemic impact to end and get back to normal, but nobody knows what normal is or when it's going to occur.
Follow-up comment. I'm very glad to hear that you are aware that the commercial is just not, or the office is not at the same influences. And also I'm going to observe, while I feel I am not aware of exactly what Metro's situation is, we are indeed fortunate as an authority that the transient occupancy tax was sent to Metro as the recordation tax then was sent to NBTA. That in that sense, in this economy, we have been fortunate.
I will follow up and note for the committee members that we do outreach to the local jurisdictions and basically look at what their predictions are for grantors and sales tax. And then we kind of consolidate those with the authority's experience. Our sales tax is a little bit different than the jurisdictions in that the NBTA sales tax does not apply to food and beverage for human consumption. And that is one of the pivot points I think we saw during the pandemic is the closures of restaurants did not impact the authority sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
I do. I have quite a few questions. Mr. Lungi, you know what? I think the closures of restaurants did not impact counties' bottom line because counties don't normally do sales tax. Towns do, cities might, but counties do not. That's probably why that happened. But a couple of questions. So if I heard you right, is the goal to try to distribute that this $97 million that came in higher than we expected to localities kind of as soon as able?
Well, those funds, which is actually 68 million, because 29 million did go, or 30 million went to the localities as part of their 30%.
And that's already done.
That's done.
That's already done. Okay. All right. All right. And then my second question is, so it came in about 90, if I heard you right, about 97 million higher than expected, because of the internet sales tax. And I'm assuming, Vivian, and that's Delegate Watts, is that the Wayfair bill?
Yes, it
That's
is.
the Wayfair bill? Okay. Mr. Lungi, is there any way to know, we know it came in higher than expected in the pandemic year. Did the money come in a good deal lower than it would normally have been had it not been a pandemic year though?
Yes, it did. We are below last year in total collections, but obviously did better than our projections. So that's where
Okay.
I was saying we were overly pessimistic when we cut the revenue projection at the start of the pandemic.
And then to one other question that Delegate Watts had. So are you counting that 15 million grantors tax into this money as well? Or is that 15 million grantors tax separate?
Well, the revenues are all split 30-70.
Right.
So 70% of that 15 million will be part of the regional revenue fund. What?
No, that's not,
Grantor's tax included in the number.
Yes.
that's right. That's what I'm asking. That's right, Monica. Okay, all right. I think that's all. Thank God for the waiver tax. Good job, General Assembly.
And Chair Randall, I will note that meals tax is a tax that many cities and towns have implemented.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Counties need.
Yeah. I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong. If Arlington might have a meals tax, but most counties don't. We leave it to the cities and towns to have that, but I'm not sure about Arlington.
I should know that.
We do,
You do? You do?
but we also don't have any cities and towns, so I don't know. If
Yeah,
that makes-
exactly. You know, that's why I said if it is somebody, it would be just Arlington. That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
And if I may also say, I believe it was in the 2020 session that now counties have taxing authority much
Right, we do.
closer to cities. However, there is a 6-year window. If any county had a referendum for a meals tax, 6 years, in other words, 2 elections of the board, and the voters still elect them. They can, by ordinance, as cities have since the 1930s, be able to increase their meals tax.
And just for the record, and because we're being recorded, let me just say that Loudoun has made the decision not to implement a meals tax, even though we have the ability to do so. Just in case anyone's watching and wants to send me an email, we're not doing it in Loudoun County.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank you. The operating budget report, I can be very concise. We underspent the budget significantly. We had actually planned when we developed the 22 budget to underspend the current operating budget by 140,000. And this is a slightly less than a $3 million budget. So it pales in comparison to the other numbers we are typically talking about. We actually brought the budget in an additional 335,000 underneath that 140. So with that, we do have some FY22 expenses that we think will be coming up that are somewhat surprising. Have surprised us. That gives us enough maneuvering room for that, and still any leftover money will go and offset the fiscal 23 budget that we'll be doing the planning work for over the winter and into the spring.
Any comments, questions? Financial activities verbal report, Mr. Longley.
I touched on some of these as we were discussing the investments and especially the revenue. I do want to say we are going through the audit process. It's getting ready to wrap up. We don't have anything that's been brought to our attention to be concerned of. There is a lot of work, almost all of it being done by Peggy Teal, as has been done in the last years. This is the time of year where she starts to develop some dark rings under her eyes, but we'll hopefully be through this process fairly quickly and have a good report for the committee. On the revenue projections, as I noted, we talked to the jurisdictions and use their own revenue projections, make some slight adjustments, especially as we discussed on the sales tax or the slight difference between the jurisdictions. It's also interesting to note that if we get the projections and get the cooperation from the 4 counties and the city of Alexandria, we actually cover 95% of the revenue. And we will be watching the grantor's tax in particular as we are making long-term estimates. And, again, one of the things that the guidance, the finance committee has always provided us, and we'll be talking about this at the October meeting as we check in on budget guidance and budget discussion, is the target for revenue projections for the authority is to always come in at a reasonable positive variance. 96 million is a little higher than I'd like. I think we can probably narrow that down a little bit, hopefully, and without another pandemic. But the purpose of that is we always want to have that positive variance so that we don't have to worry about canceling projects or delaying projects. And I mean, that's the stated intent on it. With that, we'll be preparing some budget discussion items for the committee for the October meeting. Just to kind of do a refresher on the previous guidance received from the committee and see how that applies to moving forward into the development of the fiscal 23 budget. And that concludes the financial activities.
Are there any questions? Comments, questions? Thank you, Mr. Longy. MBTA update, Ms. Backman.
So thank you, Madam Chair. I will be brief. Just as a reminder, as I've been reminding everyone, October 1st is the deadline for localities and agencies to get the applications in for the 6-year program update. It is an automated system, so October 1 at 5:01 p.m. If you're clicking in, you may not get your application in. So we've reminded everyone, your staff knows and your staffs are aware. Also, the resolutions of support are actually due in December because we understand sometimes it takes a longer time to get, the resolutions to the governing body for support. So that is that deadline. We will have an update to the authority on HB 1915, and this bill was passed back in 2015. And it essentially requires that each locality embraced by the authority informs us if there are changes to the land use or transportation section of their comprehensive plan that are not consistent with transactions. That's basically what it says. And it says, and the authority isn't compelled to alter our long-range plan if the locality changes their plan. So we will have a report. We asked the localities, are there any changes? And we were told there are no changes that they have done through comprehensive plan amendments that are inconsistent with transactions. Now, we are updating transaction at this time. The surveys just closed last week, actually, last Friday, I believe. We had over 2,300 responses.
Wow.
In the process of trying to break some of that information down, but we did get a lot of responses to the surveys and the pop-ups and things of that nature, and having information in various languages also helped. The other two items I want to touch upon, we are required to provide an annual report to the Joint Commission on Transportation Accountability by November 11th each year. Normally, you would get this on your November agenda, so you can see the report. And it's different from the annual report we do with the pictures and all of that, because November 11th, we haven't really closed out the year. But this year, your November meeting, instead of being the second Thursday of the month, is the third Thursday, because the second Thursday of the month is actually Veterans Day. So if you want to be here, we'll be here, but your meeting is actually scheduled for November the 18th instead of November the 11th, just as a reminder. And I do plan to remind the authority, when you adopted your meeting schedule, you're not meeting on Veterans Day. We pushed it back a week, but we are required to provide the JCTA an annual report on our revenues and how we've expended those revenues. And again, it's due by November 11th, so you will have a report. We're pushing for October, but hopefully we'll be finished by then. But we do file on time. Not everyone files on time, but we do file on time. And the last thing I want to inform you is that on the October authority agenda, we anticipate having a call for projects for fiscal year 28 for CMAQ and RSTP. Now, again, we make programming recommendations for CMAQ and RSTP. The code says the CTB is the decision-making body on those funds. At this time, we know the infrastructure framework bill, is going through some iteration. The Senate has passed a version, the House, and they're trying to negotiate. I know the smaller package, if you will, is getting a lot of support. We're hoping the larger package is adopted. But I say all of that to say, we are assuming that CMAQ and RSTP will still be in place as part of the infrastructure package, because those are federal funds. Now, worst case scenario, if they are not, we will make the appropriate adjustments, but we will move forward assuming that they are a part of the reauthorization. And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you again for the date change reminder. Appreciate that. Are there any comments or questions for Ms. Backman? Okay, thank you very much to staff. We appreciate everything you do. You keep us on the straight and narrow. You keep us compliant, and we appreciate that very much. Is there any other business to come before the committee? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.